Hey guys, this is Miss Adams, and we're going to look at 6A.4, factoring with and without a GCF. So after we complete this practice, you do have a Delta Math assignment. It's the 6A.4 Delta Math assignment, so make sure you're logging on and checking that out. So let's look at the first one. It says convert from intercept to standard form. And the example given to us is 2x minus 1 multiplied by x plus 7. So I'm going to create my box method because I'm going to go from intercept to standard form, so I do need to multiply each of the terms. So I have 2x minus 1 multiplied by x plus 7. And so I'm going to have 2x squared minus x, and then 14x, and 7 times negative 1 gives me a negative 7. And then we're going to combine like terms. So we do have a 14x and a negative x. That's the same thing as saying 14x minus 1x, which is going to give us 13x. So if I write our intercept form into standard form, our function is going to be 2x squared plus 13x minus 7. And if we go over to the right here, we have another example. These would normally be, if you're in class, your you-try problems. So I've got x minus 7 multiplied by x plus 3, which is going to give me x squared minus 7x. 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. And we're going to combine like terms diagonally. So if I simplify this, my simplified standard form will be x squared. Negative 7x plus 3x is going to give us negative 4x minus 21. And that's our simplified standard form. All right. So now that we have gotten past intercept to standard, which was our 6A.1 material, we're going to move on to 6A.2, which we started off with factoring by GCF, which is our greatest common factor. So I'm looking at example 2. It's given us a 6x to the 5th power plus 15x squared. So we've got to see, do they have any variables in common? If so, how many does each term have? And then we also have to look at the term's coefficients and see if there's any factor that we can take out of those coefficients. So looking at 6x to the 5th power and 15x squared, we notice that they both have an x. So I know at least our greatest common factors can contain the variable x. Our first term has 5 x's, x to the 5th power, gives us x times x times x times x times x. And our second term has x squared, which means we have two x's, so x times x. That means we look at our lowest exponent, which in this case is x squared, and that's the number of x's we can take out of each term. So I'm going to take out an x squared from each term. That's going to be part of our greatest common factor. Then we look at the coefficients. Look at your smallest coefficient first. We've got a 6 and we've got a 15. We look to see if is 6 a factor of 15. Unfortunately, 6 isn't a factor of 15, but we look for their common factors, which in this case is 3. So both terms are divisible by 3 and by x squared. So I'm going to divide both terms by 3x squared. Because when we're factoring using the greatest common factor, it's like doing the reverse of our distributive property. So I'm going to have 3x squared multiplied by, well, we got 6 divided by 3, which is 2. X to the 5th divided by x squared, so I started with 5, take away 2. I'm going to be left with x to the 3rd power. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then x squared divided by x squared is going to be 1. And anything multiplied by 1 is itself. So for example 2, our factored form is 3x squared multiplied by 2x cubed plus 5. Now if I wanted to check my answer, I could use the distributive property to check my answer. So I would distribute out the 3x squared to 2x plus 2x cubed, excuse me guys, and then 3x squared to the 5. If I do that, 3 times 2 is 6. And then I have x squared times x cubed, which is going to give me x to the 5th power. And 3 times 5 is 15. And I'll be left with 15x squared, which indeed is our original example, So it is good. This factored form is good the way it is. Let's move on to example 2 on the right-hand side. So we've got 8x to the 4th power minus 6x. So looking at the greatest common factor, I first can see that they both contain an x. The lowest exponent of our x's here is 1, so I can only take out one x from each term. Then I look at the lowest coefficient, which is 6. 6 is not a factor of 8, but they're both divisible by 2. So our greatest common factor is 2x. I'm going to divide both terms by 2x. I'm going to put our greatest common factor first. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And x to the 4th power divided by x is going to be 4 minus 1. So x cubed minus 6 divided by 2 is 3. And x divided by x is 1. So our factored form is 2x multiplied by 4x cubed minus 3. That gets us into factoring trinomials, which is where we have to do the multi-step process. The first thing we want to look for is a greatest common factor. So we've got 6x squared plus 15x plus 9. Looking at our lowest coefficient, 6, it does not go into 15 or 9, so I am going to have to look for a factor that they all share. In this case, it's 3. So I'm going to divide each term by 3, and that's our greatest common factor. And we'll come back to that greatest common factor right at the end. We'll bring it back. So 6x squared divided by 3 is going to give us 2x squared. And then we've got 15x divided by 3. That's going to give us 5x. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So now we can list our A, our B, and our C. Our A in this case is 2. B is 5. And C is 3. Now we make our table. We've got to find two numbers that multiply to AC and add to B. So I've got A times C and our B value here. A times C, I've got 2 times 3 is 6, and my B value is 5. If I look at the factors of 6, I've got 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Well, if I were to add these, 1 plus 6 is going to give me 7. That will not work. But 2 plus 3 gives me 5. So these are the magic number set that I'm going to be looking for. I know that 5 is 2 plus 3. So 5x is going to be the same thing as 2x plus 3x. And I bring my other terms down. I've got plus 3 and 2x squared out front. I've got 4 terms now, so I can factor by grouping. I'm going to look at the first group here and factor out a 2x. So I'm going to divide everything by 2x in that first grouping. And I'm going to be left with x squared plus 1. And then I'm going to look at the second grouping, find their greatest common factor, which is 3. Divide each term by 3. I'm also left, not x squared plus 1. On that first one, it should be x plus 1. Because 2x squared divided by 2x, 2 divided by 2 is 1. X squared divided by x just leaves you with 1x. And then I go back to the second grouping. I apologize there, guys. I've got 3x plus 3. 3x divided by 3 gives me an x. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now looking here, they both contain this x plus 1 as a factor. So that becomes a greatest common factor as well. So I'm going to bring down my original greatest common factor, which was 3. I've got the greatest common factor of x plus 1. And then what I call my leftovers, these were the greatest common factors that we took out of the factoring by grouping. So I've got 2x plus 3 as my final factor. And we just converted from standard to intercept form. Let's look at number 3. On the right-hand side, it says 14x squared minus 18x plus 4. Our GCF is 2, because 2 is the only factor that can be taken out of all 3 terms. So I have 2 multiplied by 7x squared minus 9x plus 2. Now I've got to find my A, B, and C and make my AC and B columns. In this case, my A value is 7. My B value is -9. And my C value is +2. So I have 7 times 2, which is 14, as my A times C. And my B is -9. Notice your B is negative, but your A times C is positive. The only way that we can make this happen is by taking two negatives and multiplying them together and then adding them together. So I'm going to look at the factors of 14, which are 1 or 14, and 2 and 7. But I'm going to look at -1 times -14 and -2 times -7. If I add -1 and -14, I'm going to be left with -15, which is not -9. But this -2 plus -7 does give me -9. So where I have a -9x, I'm going to break it up to -2x minus 7x. And all my other terms, the 7x squared and the 2, will come down. So now I'm going to factor by grouping. In this first group, they both contain an x. So I'm going to factor out an x, which will leave me with 7x minus 2. And in the second grouping, I really can't factor out much, but if you look at that grouping, it's very similar to 7x minus 2, except the signs are switched. We've got -7x plus 2. So let's factor out a -1. So I'm going to factor out a -1, and I'm left with 7x minus 2. That then becomes our next greatest common factor. So I'm going to pull down this 2 from the very beginning. Then I have 7x minus 2. And my last factor group is x minus 1. And that is our intercept form of 14x squared minus 18x plus 4. Now these last two problems, they don't have a greatest common factor. So we do not have to find a greatest common factor in the beginning. Our A value is going to be 1. So now we can list out our A, B, and C. The A value of the intercept form is going to be 1 because our GCF, in this case, is 1. But we've got to look at the A, B, and C of our standard form first. In this case, our A is 3, B is 2, and C is -1. So now I'm going to have A times C and B. A times C is going to give us a -3 because 3 times -1 is -3. And then we have a B value of 2. So I have to find two things that multiply to a -3 but add to a +2. So if I've got two things that multiply to -3 and add to a +2, I know one has to be negative, one has to be positive. And the only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. So I've got to figure out which way this will work. If we make the 1 negative and keep the 3 positive, we're going to be left with a +2. So -1 times 3 gives us a -3, but -1 plus 3 is going to give us a +2. We break that 2x then into -1x plus 3x, and everything else comes down. And we factor by grouping like we did before. So divide by an x in this first grouping, and we're left with 3x minus 1. And notice the second grouping, there's not a greatest common factor, so we can just pull out a 1, and we're also left with 3x minus 1. They both contain this greatest common factor of 3x minus 1, so our final groupings are 3x minus 1 and x plus 1. All right, guys, one more example problem here. We've got x squared plus 10x plus 16. Remember, we don't have a GCF here. If it makes it easier on you, our GCF is 1, so we can't really factor anything out. We got an A, we got a B, and we got a C. Our A value is 1. Our B value is 10. And our C value is 16. So I've got to find two numbers that multiply to A times C and add to our B value. Well, 1 times 16 just gets us 16, and our B value is 10. So I've got 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. The magical pairing here is going to be 2 times 8 because I know 2 plus 8 gives me 10. 2 times 8 is 16. So where I have that 10x originally, I can break it apart into 2x and 8x. And I'll still bring down my x squared and my 16. So x squared plus 2x, I'm going to divide by x in both terms. So I've got x plus 2 factored out there. And then if I look at my second grouping, I got 8x plus 16. Our greatest common factor is 8 here. 8x divided by 8 is x. 16 divided by 8 is 2. They both share this greatest common factor of x plus 2. So our factored form is going to be x plus 2 multiplied by x plus 8. All right, guys. That is all the notes from 6A.4, so make sure you are logging on to Delta Math and completing those assignments. Have a great day.